So Terry brought up a very interesting point as it relates to the concept of sample snitching. Is there a time for that, or is there, is it as...
Or what quantifies or
what qualifies sample snitching? Because we come from the era where it was a no-no to do that. Pull Up Gang started with Primo when at the end of, what's the record, Jay Moore, where he goes off at the end talking
Royalty?
about... Royalty, yeah.
Well, let me ask you this then. What was considered sample snitching in the past? We can start there.
I think that's what I want to...
And then we can talk about how it's kind of changed.
I'm going to let Terry jump in. You go ahead and jump in.
That's what I want to kind of preface, because, I mean, back in the day when you actually got a record and a liner and, credits, the sample was in there anyway, right?
Yes.
So if you actually were somebody that delved in more than just popping your CD or your tape in the deck, you kind of knew it was sampled, essentially. So you could go back and revisit that. But what... You don't know what part of that record is sampled, and you don't know what they did to it. Just like, for example, 𝐀𝐁𝐎𝐔𝐓. If you heard the original sample from 𝐀𝐁𝐎𝐔𝐓, you would not be able to put that together. There's like no way possible. So is it a situation to where if it's not an obvious sample,
I think
it's okay? Well, if it's an obvious sample, it's okay to state it. But if it's not an obvious sample, you kind of keep it under wraps if you know
So I think
it.
there's another piece to what you're saying too, because yes, sometimes and oftentimes, especially on major releases, you would list the sample in the credits. But there's also an entire history and really a culture around not doing that.
Purposely not doing it.
And that's kind of where hip hop was. That's like one of the fundamental foundational blocks of sampling in hip hop, and that was that. So
that's why people would cover the labels of the records they were playing, because the break that I found, that's not for you, that's not for the public. This is what I'm going to do to move the crowd.
It goes all the way back to DJing.
Yes.
So that's the other caveat to that as well. I would to extend on what you're saying. I don't think anybody has a problem with sharing samples that are listed by the artist. Like if I put out a record and I literally put in the credits and the liner notes that I've sampled these records, I don't care if somebody shares what that is personally.
Right.
I think to me, it goes down to taking money out of people's pockets when one of the foundational elements of hip hop and hip hop culture is sampling and understanding that you're going to potentially harm legends of the culture that sample. Years before this was like a thing where you could go and look stuff up and put it out there, and you could harm their well-being in a time when they weren't making a lot of money for all the foundational blocks that they built.
So is that speaking on somebody that may not have listed any of the sampling, and now you're able to pick it up, and somebody whoever was sampled are able to kind of see that information and in turn sue that artist? Is that okay?
Because what you're doing is you're bringing, when you sample, quote unquote, sample snitch for something that's been under the radar forever, you're bringing unnecessary attention to that artist.
That's a good phrase.
And that part is the part that Primo and those guys are talking about, I think, because in the liner notes, I used to read them. I wanted the instrumentation, who played the keys. I just used to read that. But sample snitching is the foundation is, why are you bringing this attention to this joint that I took 2 weeks to dig and find? I think that's what the problem is. I think that's the root of a large part of the problem.
So is it more of a purist thing, or is it more of a
legal thing?
It's both. I think it's both.
I think it's both. And I would be curious to I feel like this is probably even more nuanced. Like, I'm sure this is a very interesting question for Pete Rock specifically. In Primo, I bet they could delve even deeper into this as well. But I think it's both.
I do too.
But for them specifically, considering they were there and they were the ones, I don't want to say hiding the records, but they were the ones digging. They were a part of that era and generation.
Think about the time or the interview. I believe it was on the No, it may not have been on the documentary with Tribe, but there is an interview with QTip where he talks about him going to New York, wherever he was living, and they had a huge record convention, and he saw Pete, he saw Primo, and they were all just laughing about, we trying to get to what? That's what it was.
Yeah, and Pete was like,
I'm tucking my records, I don't want them to see what I got. That's what this is all based off of.
Hip Hop Evolution documentary is what that is.
That's what it is. Thank you.
And in that particular part, QTip was talking about how like Pete Rock would tell him the wrong stuff, you know, and like people would be looking over people's shoulders and stuff like that. And there was even a part in there where Shad, who was hosting it, was talking to Pete and he was like, so what were some of the highly touted records? He's like, I can't tell you, you know, and stuff like that. So it's like, I feel like, you know, I can't speak from like that generation, them specifically. I can only speak on what I've, you know, picked up from them and me as a producer for over 20 years that samples and that's where the fundamentally part that I came from and understand this stuff. But I think it's both.
Well, you know, I think part of it comes from the fact that like there are certain things when you hear it, you like, you know what that is. They sampled a popular song or they sampled a song by a legendary artist. Like the record that we just listened to, you know, for those of you who would like to get down with the Patreon.
There we go.
By Common and Pete Rock. Okay, the vocal sample, we know that's Aretha Franklin.
Yep.
Okay. All right, that's not something they tried.
And then he kind of referenced it in the rap too.
Exactly. You know, but there are a couple of the layered samples there that I recognize. But when I say don't snitch, that's what I'm talking about.
Like the horns on that Common song.
Stop.
You know what I mean?
Stop.
Yeah.
So, but you know, I remember. I don't know if you remember the time it was like a daytime event where Jake One was here at the Jazz Kitchen. This is years ago, and you know, he talked about how we're really in an era where it is the Wild West. You know, and he talked a little bit about, you know, the stuff he did and like he thought nobody would pick up on, and there's one person who hears about it and alerts some lawyer, and then he's got to go through all this stuff. Like now there's something, you know, I remember on the stimulus package that the joint he did with Freeway.
Fire.
But we knew the record that they put out first with, you know, She Makes Me Feel All Right. Of course, that's Rick James.
Yeah.
Right.
So, you know, and that's in the liner notes. But if you go, there aren't credits like that on every song. And I'm pretty sure to somebody who really wants to do their homework or just might want to be a snitch about it, could go through and all these independent hip hop releases could say, hey, that sounds like you took a horn stab from here. It sounds like you took the drums from here. It sounds like you took a little wah-wah from here. You know what I'm saying? So really, I think now we're in the era, especially when we don't really know what anything is selling and only a few different records get on the radio. I think there are a lot of people who are doing some layering and slowing down and pitching up to where a lot of the stuff you could tell it still samples, but we're not, but it's not, we're in a different era as far as the finances are concerned to where, you know, if you know, I would suggest that you just don't snitch.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to. I think, Mike, you hit it right on the head when you said unnecessary attention. Like, it's like, it's one thing to talk about it with your homies and stuff like that. It's another thing for us to get on here and be like, all right, let's listen to this Jake One album and pick out all the samples.
Yeah.
And it's another thing for the people in the comments to be and be like, or to have an entire message boards about this and Discord servers about like, yeah, let's find it's who sampled it. Always just puts like a bad taste in my mouth.
Who sampled is what I wanted to bring up, because shout out to
or even when they put out the break records and it would be like what the original artist is and who sampled it. I was like, do we really need to? I think that's part of what Pete Rock talked about. You know, at the end of royalty, you
don't know what
Premiere.
You guys know, but how elaborate who sampled it. They have a filter system where you can say, let's say it was Alchemist. Let's just use Alchemist. It'll say songs where Alchemist rapped on that have samples, songs that Alchemist produced. All of those samples.
And it'll literally show both of the original and
side by side.
And what time the sample starts. And
they have to the T exactly where it comes in. Or it could be like only joints produced by Alchemist, just by him. You can do 12 different filters, and it's all quote unquote sample stitching. Like I remember when I saw this, I was like, it's a rap.
I'll say one thing. I don't have, and maybe this is where I differ from other people, I don't have a problem with quote unquote sample snitching or talking about samples if the original producer and artist has already publicly made it public. For example, if it's in the liner notes or something like that of the record, I don't have a problem with it. But if the creator intentionally left it out for whatever reason, then that's where it becomes a little weird to me. Or if it's obvious, you know, like, you know, if you're going to sample Rick James, obviously, you know, he's a major artist. But if you're going to sample the Butterfly Collective from 1964 that only released a rare 12, you know,
local record,
you know, 7-inch that, you know, only pressed X amount of copies and all this other stuff. It's like, come on, man. Like, now granted, there's other conversations to be had about the ethics in this, right? Which we can have, but I don't know if we want to go there yet.
But there are certain producers that have a certain style where this could I will say harm. Certain producers can be harmed more by this unnecessary attention than others. Everybody's not into crates.
Yeah.
We know the producers that are actually in the crate. Like when I hear certain stuff, I'm like, I have no idea where you got that from.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, if you want a bite, just go to Who Sampled and it's going to show you everything. And I know for a fact, in today's era especially, these projects come out with a front and a back, and there are no liner notes anymore. So we know the samples are not being put out like they used to, but they're still being filtered through the people that are
AI
doing the snitch.
I mean,
doing the snitching or
now
whatever.
you have stems, so you can literally break a song down in stems and figure certain things out.
Yep.
One of the other reasons I brought this up too is because Ninth Wonder was doing a DJ set. This was back during the pandemic, so he's DJing live, streaming, and he would play the sample song first and then lead into the song. And he kept saying, stop sample snitching to people commenting in the chat.
Yep.
So it kind of was an oxymoron to me because you're playing the sample and then you're playing the original and then you're playing a joint that was sampled.
Doesn't mean everybody knows it though.
Was it? I mean, but we're in a day and age where I can Shazam anything.
Yes.
That's fair. That's fair.
So if he's playing something, I can put on Shazam and I can pick it up.
That's fair.
And it to me, it was like, I understand what he was saying, but at the same time, it's like you're giving people the answers to the test and you just don't want people to say what the answer to the test is, and then you're playing the sample.
I think that's part of it, though. I think that alludes to what Mike said about you don't have to bring unnecessary. I've never really thought about it because I know DJs that do that.
We do that at Take That Tuesday.
Yeah, I think all DJs do it, but
You've done it.
Him in particular was while he was streaming saying stop sample snitching.
Yeah.
But it's almost like you were telling the story,
Leading the way there
without saying the artist.
Would that
This is a time where everybody was sitting at home anyway. They're excited and anxious to hear this stuff. That that's such and such song. You know, they're typing that in the comments, and I don't think consciously they were thinking that they were snitching on the sample, so to speak. And then with you dropping the actual joint afterwards or group with it, to me that kind of was like.
But would you think? And I ask you, would you think that them putting the comments about the sample into, like naming the sample in the comments, wouldn't that kind of fall under the unnecessary attention? Was that necessary to put that in there?
But
even though he's playing
the joint, though,
that doesn't mean you have to put them in there. You don't have to put the title of the records in there. You see what I'm saying?
I think it also goes to what I see in the comment sections of like the bringing down the band stuff too, is like back when we used to share and I used to promote a lot of like just records from people would come into the comments and be like, what sample is this? And that always bothered me because from another angle too, because and I think it goes along with this because it's like a lot of them I think are like young producers and I think they're lazy. Like they're not digging. They want everything kind of handed to them. Like, what is that sample? Tell me does anybody know what this sample is? And there's a very
everything's microwave.
There's a very interesting culture around that, and to me that is sample snitching. Like if you go out and you're telling another producer what another producer makes, so they can go and try to make something the same way that the other person did. That kind of falls into that realm a little bit as well as lame and
that's
unoriginal.
Corny. That's corny.
And you know
that's corny.
So that I think that's another element that we haven't really touched on yet. But what you mentioned, Terry, about the samples leading up from a DJ standpoint, I've never actually thought about that, but that is similar to. I mean, it's literally a DJ kind of
telling himself.
Even now, I've seen a lot of people, like even with this Kendrick joint, the Not Like Us. There's a DJ just put out a video last week. It's cold how he did it.
He broke it all the way down.
But he broke down the sample. And he's literally telling you where he pulled it from.
Yes.
The original. And then he plays dun, 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 and he starts, you know what I'm saying, using the buttons to show you how it was sampled and lead it into the song.
I want to ask what song it was because the only reason why not the sample snitch, but because I watched a video of somebody doing that and I don't think it's the same sample.
The one I think Terry
sometimes they do get it wrong because
yes, they do.
Somebody actually said that the sample was Ether at first.
I heard
and Mustard had to come back and be like, no, I didn't sample Ether when I did it.
I never heard Ether.
But he never said what he sampled either. But this DJ knew what he sampled.
I see.
So he's playing the original first, and then he starts chopping it on the spot, and then plays it. And that's been in with DJ culture on social media for a while now.
Yeah.
Where they'll play the sample and then chop it and then lead into the song.
I actually saw, to Terry's point, I actually saw a video and I was amazed. It was a guy that's a DJ. He's extremely dope. He did what Terry's talking about for like 12 records and just was going in and out, going through the controller, how it was assigned. Like, on my producer ear says, this is dope that you actually programmed it and was able to chop it back up to replay it yourself. That part is fire. But when I see the list and I say, okay, here go all the samples in the description on Instagram, I'm like,
So does that qualify? So if a DJ is making social media content, he's using the song, originally playing the original song, and then chop it,
and he names them
to it.
And he names them?
Yeah, I mean, because he said, like I said, even if he doesn't name it, if he's playing that sample, somebody has Shazam, they can Shazam it, and it's going to tell you who it is.
I'll be honest, I think that almost all of this would fall under the category of sample snitching.
Okay.
Even the DJing stuff, like, I think my line has always been in the past around the producer thing that I mentioned about producers asking other producers about that stuff. That's always been a line for me. It's always been a line for me of involuntarily or voluntarily just giving stuff away in a public manner that you shouldn't be. But I've never really thought about the DJ aspect of it. And I think it's because of DJing being a fundamental part of
the culture,
hip hop in general.
And so having those breaks is really what
that's interesting.
But Lone, I think you've had this before too, but I have had people say, yeah, this is a sample I got. I'm gonna send it to you. See what you can do with it.
That's fine.
That doesn't bother me. That's cool.
That's cool.
That's sharing amongst peers.
Right. I've done that before where somebody's like, yo, man, here you go. This is what I found. I want to hear how you flip it.
Yeah, but you're not going to come and be like, yo, can I have your S directory of songs?
Right,
like,
right.
That part.
Sorry, no.
That part. I agree with you.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know if I have maybe I'm in the wrong too.
We might be, because Terry made a good point about the lead-ins, but I don't know. It's just,
and that's very popular
I feel
nowadays.
knife on the comments, but I also feel where Terry's coming from, because you really are throwing a lob when you do the lead.
Yeah, I might just be a hypocrite in this manner.
It's almost a slippery slope at this point, because there's so many different avenues and angles you can go about doing it. Because as a DJ, it's almost like you expect that and you get hyped when you hear it and see how they did it. But in the same token, somebody else is like, damn, why'd he tell where the sample came from?
Yeah.
But it made for a good set.
And some people may say, from the social media standpoint, somebody could be like, man, this is just, it's educational. I'm trying to put people on game as to how people make beats and sample. Maybe I'm just trying to show people how that works and go through the process. Maybe people look at it that way. So I don't know. It's very subjective. There's a lot of gray area on this one, because we know both sides. We've obviously are in the culture, so we know the ramifications of each side. But that unnecessary attention, man, that's you can get people in trouble doing that.
But at the same time, I don't think as a DJ I would go out here and intentionally
have a set of that.
Have a set of something that's like really rare and like do that particular thing in a. I don't know. If you got any thoughts on that?
Like if I do a set and I go from human nature to it ain't hard to tell, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Because that's a common sample, though.
Yeah,
agreed.
If I go from just whatever things that we know, and we know that people have cleared those samples.
Yep.
But if you go through and start looking in liner notes and be like, he didn't clear this.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and I know that record. Let me go ahead and dig that record out.
I like
and
that
then
record.
start doing a whole.
I'm gonna get back to that for the record.
Yeah, you do a whole bunch of sample snitching on things that people probably have not cleared.
Yep.
And once again, like Jake one saying, hey man, right now it's the Wild Wild West.
He wasn't lying.
And there's right now it's like, hey man, I'd rather, we talked about this earlier concerning, just domestic issues. Sometimes it's better. Sometimes people are like, hey, I'll ask for forgiveness before I ask for permission.
Yeah.
Dig it.
What about, we could cut it there, but there's also the argument that people are going to have with this conversation of the ethics around sampling in itself is technically stealing from other people's music. To use it.
But I mean, if you're getting permission.
But here's the thing. Well, let's talk about the people that don't want it revealed, right? The rare stuff. And then if they reveal it, then that's just them revealing that this is somebody who didn't get paid, who deserves to be paid. And I think my argument to that has always been, well, do you like hip hop music? And do you understand where it came from? And do you understand where it was created from and how it had to be created from?
Little breaks.
Yeah, but out of the necessity, you know, for the creation of it was at the time period.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing, a different thing that could definitely be talked about.
I think now in 2024, there's no reason to sample somebody without crediting them.
Like it'd be crazy
Now.
if somebody in 2024 said, "Hey, I'll just see if I can get away with sampling Steely Dan." Well, especially you know how Steely Dan get down.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, like if I sample a record right now and I try to pass it off and put it out, there's too much education out here. There's too much knowledge around all this stuff to, like, I should know to. There's no reason for me to not have to reach out to somebody to try to clear something. There really isn't. I mean,
the date and time, essentially.
yeah, you know, and don't get me wrong, there's still going to be people that don't agree with me right now, but to me it's different now than it was in like 1979 to 80 to 81 to 82 to 83
Even the
and
90s
what
where
was
people were
happening then.
definitely trying to hide the sample.
Yeah, a lot of people.
And then when it actually came to the forefront, they're not making any money off of it now.
For sure. Yeah.
But also, it's like there's a lot of people who are sampling and they're like they weren't generating any money. Now, when you, like I said, we talked about Steely Dan. Like, okay, Deja Vu wound up being a major hit.
Yeah.
Steely Dan's not coming for you if you if it's just ride around the neighborhood.
If you got,
they not go bother you.
7,000 streams across all DSPs,
right,
chances are Steely Dan is not coming for you.
Now, if you have a record, I think from a producer standpoint, if you sample something and you have a record that you know the artist has some level of, you know, buzz or significance or something to a higher level, you might want to be mindful, to Lone's point, and make sure that you at least reach out, do your due diligence, and cover those things, because that can come back to haunt you, especially if you're working with somebody that's,
I don't
absolutely because
you know what I mean?
It happens to well-known producers and people that have made it. I mean, Dr. Dre had a suit that came up with like 10 years after a song came out, but everybody's not Dr. Dre. They can go in, and if that need be, all right, I'll cut you the check or make sure the splits is right on that joint.
Max.
Everybody doesn't have the same success as him.
True.
Right.
Because it can literally make or break an artist to the point where, okay, my biggest hit is now not mine, so I'm not making any money off of it. You know me off of this hit, but I'm paying everybody else but me. You know what I'm saying? Every time you hear it.
I mean, it's just crazy when you think about De La Soul got caught up in this on their first album. And it's like all those, because they had they had Hall & Oates, they had Parliament Funk, they cleared all that. They made all the paperwork was done on that. And I don't know if it was somebody who said, ain't nobody thinking about the Turtles. Then that's the one sample they didn't clear, and that's the one that got them in trouble.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think too, it's sometimes it's around intent. I think it's how you approach it as a producer.
That's a good point.
Like if you are looping stuff, I think I have more of a problem with looping than if you chop something up and kind of repurpose it. I think there's a difference. Yeah, well,
you can rearrange
like a break for sure.
Yeah, you
classic breaks.
You can rearrange stuff though. You can rearrange.
But what I'm saying is, like, if somebody's taking a record and they're chopping it up and they're repurposing it in a different type of manner, and maybe I'm a little biased here, I feel like that's way different than just taking a 1 measure, 2 measure, 4 measure part of a song where you're literally deriving everything from the original.
Right.
And then you're just looping that.
Right.
That is, to me, more
That's
so
different.
stealing intellectual property as opposed to taking a stab and then pitching it and doing all this other stuff. Now, granted, I'm biased because I do that, but and even when I play my own stuff, and most of my stuff's original anymore, except for when it's intentionally not, which I have projects that are intentionally not original, which you can look up the Lone Love series. But
definitely.
But I think that's different. It's a different approach, you know, like, too. So
did we actually clear the air on that, or is it kind of still?
It's too gray, bro. I think it's too gray,
conversation
man.
started. I don't know. I don't know what else we could really say.
I really want some people to chime in on this, to kind of give us some feedback on what they think, or something to add to it, because I think it's something that needs to be known.
I'd like to hear from both the creatives and just consumers. Just like to get a opinion, you know what I mean, like a view from both angles. I have a feeling I know what the creatives are going to say, but I'd love to see what the consumer says.
I don't care.
I think the consumers are not going to care.
I don't know,
because
man.
they don't listen. You got to understand, they don't listen to music the same way.
Yeah.
So to them, it's just entertainment.
It's just the difference is going to be like age range in certain types of producers.
You think that's where it's going to start getting divided?
People that love like making Griselda type beats are going to be anti.
Yeah.
People that
because we know those
that are original are
my
probably going to
God.
be the other way around. You know, people that are from like the 80s and the 90s are probably going to be anti. People that are from 2000 and was born in 1990 or 2004 probably don't even care and think that it's an issue. So
they're like
Dang,
samples.
Lon, you might have just nailed
it's
the whole
just,
thing, really.
you know, I
The
don't
way you
know.
broke the eras down, because the Griselda people gonna be like, nah, we don't.
Because the thing is, I'll listen to a West Side Gun Pro. I was like, I know this is a sample, but I have no idea where it's from.
They be in the crates though.
A lot of that stuff is recycled.
It is.
It's just like, okay, you just heard that Alchemist used this record and you went and found a different part of the song.
Well,
Yeah. Well, that was
You're-
big. That was real
Well-
big in the 90s too, though.
No.
Because I mean, we've even had this conversation about Between the Sheets
okay.
and how many times that was sampled.
That was a popular
and people
record.
were using different parts
But
of the
think
song.
about the difference
It's a
between
popular
Lon's
record.
talking
between
about
the
more
sheets
rare
and
joints
ignorant.
Yeah.
But it was a
That
different.
see, the ignorant was more of a chop though, but it was still a whole part of the
I mean,
song.
you could tell that
essentially.
they had to pay for it because it's Rockefeller and Jay-Z.
Yes,
but you know,
yes.
think about the difference between You Can't Touch This and Kingdom Come.
Yeah.
Now that's a chop. Kingdom Come is a chop.
That was crazy.
But I think the distinct difference here is the style of record that you're chopping and how big it is. Like back in the 90s, they're not over here telling each other what records they're sampling. They're just randomly finding them and sampling them, as opposed to now where people are like intentionally looking up to see, oh, well, if Alchemist used this, or if 𝐷𝗔𝗥𝗧𝗏 used this, or if this Madlib used this, maybe I can chop it up too in my own way.
I have a question for you. I have a question specifically for you. I'm sorry, I don't want to. We can get to. I know we got a little time, but remember we talked about intention.
Okay.
So we talked about looping versus chopping, which we can do both. We grew up that way. Original too. We grew up that way.
Mhm.
What about? I'll give you a 4-bar loop with added instrumentation. Does that change? If I got keys, live bass, and maybe we're gonna throw in a couple horns, and I arrange it around the 4 bars, does that change how you feel versus just a straight loop and we just gonna get right on up out of here? Like orchestration around the loop.
Kind of, but not really.
Okay.
And I know that you do that.
Oh yeah, I'm just, the reason I'm asking is because I know where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I know both. I know both. Of them.
And not that that's the only thing you do or anything.
No, but you know what I mean.
But I know you do that, and the records you do that with are super fire. But to me, that's still looping. I think it's not quite the same as using the loop as a crutch.
Okay, that's
You
there
know,
we go.
I don't think there's any crutches involved in that at all.
There
I
we
think
go.
it's
There we
just
go.
making a good record.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind
It's
of the
still
same.
closer.
Yeah. But from the same, it's the same idea of using a drum break that somebody makes versus
Right.
chopping that drum break up.
You know
and there's a difference.
how that goes.
Yeah.
Because you can turn a drum loop or a drum break into something completely different. That's
Yeah.
facts.
Yeah.
That's facts.